What I wish someone had told me sooner was that confidence isn't a single attribute, but rather it's actually a combination of several traits, four to be exact: certainty, courage, cause, and authenticity. And if you had to say the one thing that holds people from reaching their maximum potential, what would you say it is? I had to pick a single skill as an X factor. It wouldn't be a tangible skill like editing, sales, learning how to master some piece of software. It would actually be an emotional one, specifically the attribute of confidence. Because I found out the hard way that in sales, business, relationships, or any form of communication, the level of confidence a person displays can completely shift the flow and direction of any interaction. And these four traits of certainty, courage, cause, and authenticity operate like music equalizer bars, where as you adjust one, it can dramatically affect the total confidence of any situation. So when I was starting out in my sales career, I found that memorizing a bunch of lines to use on potential customers only got me so far. I actually realized pretty quickly that if I was actually going to reach any of my goals in my career, both my charisma and my confidence would have to increase dramatically. So today we're going to be going over these four levers that we can use to build our confidence to a bulletproof level, and then one quick trick to raise them all at the same time. Now, I want to take a little bit of a step back and kind of give you some of my door-to-door sales origins, because that's really where this began for me. Is I came out of college in between my summers doing door-to-door sales to help pay for my tuition. And long story short, I was nowhere near some kind of savant. I was about as brainy and awkward as it could possibly be. And I struggled for quite a while. And door-to-door sales is pretty famous for memorized scripts. And my words might have been the same as some of the top performing reps, but the way that I was saying them was completely off. And I struggled for a long time to learn the correct tonality and body language of the sales world. But also I wanted to learn how to be more confident, not just in a work environment, but also in my day-to-day non-sales environments. And as I explored that opportunity for me to try to learn how to improve my confidence in different scenarios, I often found myself asking people that I looked up to, like my parents, specifically my dad, who had done a full career in sales, and then also my leaders and my mentors, and then just other friends who were doing better than I was. And consistently, as people were trying to define confidence and define charisma, I found that most of the time people were really struggling to define it. They were telling me more things about what confidence wasn't, or through some kind of like vague, not really practical advice. People would just tell me to be myself, or pretend like you're talking to a friend. Or they would try to pin down that definition by saying something like, it's not arrogance or being rude, but you can't be a doormat either. It's about being sure of yourself. And while all of those things are actually true, they never really meant a whole lot to me, and I couldn't really place them, especially as a recovering overthinker. And unfortunately though, I did have some really good coaches and mentors over the years who helped me implement exercises like positive self-talk and high levels of exposure to stressful situations that gradually improved my confidence. So I was able to get by and slowly improve in my different sales roles. But it wasn't really until I was reading the book called The Attributes by Rich Diviney, where he described some attributes in clusters rather than as single standalone traits, that I actually realized that confidence was one of these clusters of traits. And while Rich didn't talk about it directly, I quickly realized that if I could see confidence as this skill set of different traits clumped together that form these levers and these equalizer bars, it immediately clicked to me. And all of a sudden, it made perfect sense to me why so many people had struggled with how to describe accurately what confidence really was. And now I was actually able to put it into my own words, or actually I put it into an equation. I know, total nerd thing to do, but it worked for me. And so this is how I formulated it. Confidence equals certainty plus courage times cause plus authenticity. And that was my formula. Let's take those one at a time. Certainty. Basically, it's your familiarity with specific situations and the amount of assurance that you possess in that given situation. This is honestly the most simply built of the four pieces, and it's done through sheer repetition and gradual exposure to tougher and tougher scenarios. It is a slow process. I'll be honest, it's not very sexy, but it is a surefire way to improve your confidence in any given scenario. It's the evidence that you have that you can prove that you know how to handle a given scenario. And this is the reason why so many professional athletes drill scenarios hundreds and hundreds of times, because it builds a stack of evidence so high that it removes all doubt as to their capability to perform, especially in high-stakes scenarios. But then you run into those situations where you're in a new environment or where the stakes are higher than normal. And this is where courage comes into play. Now, courage is largely about perception because it deals with the unknown. There are so many factors that we have no idea how it's going to turn out. And so that creates a natural sense of fear, that first gut reaction. And that's why I say courage is largely about perception, because we can have a first impression and rather than being rattled by it, see it for what it is by separating a fact from our judgment or opinion. Then we have the opportunity to place it into a more positive frame of mind. Because what I think most people make the mistake of, at least I know I did, is that when we feel that initial fear, we feel like we're being afraid. We feel like that's a bad thing. And in reality, it's not. Fear is simply a first impression. It's a natural reaction that every person experiences on one level or another. And like I said, it's just normal. Ryan Holiday does a great job talking about this in his book, Courage is Calling. But where we actually get into trouble with fear is when we act out of it. When we accept the perception of fear. That's when we've gone from having experienced fear to actually being afraid. And this is something that is actually harmful, that will actually paralyze you and cause you to lose control of a situation. So courage is largely the skill of being able to pause and assess a situation, where we can hold it up to the light and ask ourselves questions and reframe any given situation in a new environment, in a new light. And that way we're able to acknowledge the fear, but then actually act rationally and calmly. Now, this third part is a little different from the others because I refer to cause as the amplifier of courage. Cause is what's actually getting us out to do something. What is the why behind doing something or some goal? And it's the one thing that can completely change our level of willingness to tackle a tough situation and push through any obstacle, regardless of the fears or the danger. And this might be a bit of an oversimplification for some folks, but to me, there's really only three causes: fear, desire, and love. I'll talk more about these in another video, but suffice it to say that I am much less willing to run into a burning building to rescue a stranger simply for the sake of fame or notoriety, rather than if I was going into a burning building to save one of my nieces or nephews. The simple hack behind this is if you can learn to adapt your cause to a higher source or frequency, you automatically multiply your courage and increase your confidence. Now, each one of these motivators, each one of these causes has its own potency and its own effects. So fear, desire, and love all have different uses, and there's a time and a place for all of them. And finally, the last variable of confidence is authenticity, or I like to say the ability to be true to yourself and the values that you have in a given situation. It's been said so many times, it's almost becoming meaningless, but it still holds true that you're the only you, and no one else has your combination of experiences, insights, values, and personality. And the greatest value that you can bring to any interaction is to be the person who can let all of that shine. Now, I do want to be clear, authenticity is not an excuse to be a complete jerk or to take advantage of a situation, because we're too lazy to make the effort to be the best version of ourselves. Using the phrase, "That's just who I am, take it or leave it," as a justification for doing something that you know is wrong is an expression of selfishness and laziness. True authenticity brings out the best in who you are. It adds value to an interaction through being present by displaying insight and integrity, and it also makes your actions consistent with how you would like people to treat you when you're being treated by others. True authenticity brings out the best in who you are. It adds value to an interaction through being present, by displaying insight and integrity, and it makes your actions consistent with how you want to be treated. It doesn't take from people, it actually gives the best of us and requires effort. And the best way to build your authenticity is to really understand who you are and what your values are. What's the direction and purpose of your life? And also the ability to be present with an interaction, to be present with another person. There are some really good exercises out there on how to build these different pieces of our authenticity, doing things like goal setting and vision boards, meditating, journaling, and asking ourselves tough and meaningful questions are a great way to become more familiar with who we really are. And as an aside, I actually think it's one of the big reasons why there's such a struggle with authenticity and by extension confidence in the world, because we're really not accustomed to taking the time to do that kind of deep work. It's required to really understand who we are as individuals and the role that we play in a society. And as a result, like I said, I think both our authenticity and our confidence suffer. And the best part of authenticity, in my opinion, is that when people feel that you're in that state of flow and giving, they reciprocate, and it becomes easier to build on that momentum within an interaction. And you find that you've not only boosted your confidence, but you've actually strengthened or made a new friend. That's essentially the confidence equation as I've emulated it for myself. So again, certainty plus the combined effect of courage times cause plus authenticity. And the fun thing about this formula is it shows that there's more than one way to increase your confidence. You can do it so many different ways, but I would recommend starting by assessing yourself, just taking an honest assessment in each of those categories, and then working on the one that you feels like needs the most improvement. Or you can just go for the low-hanging fruit. Most often, I found with the reps that I lead and the clients that I work with that the lowest hanging fruit is the cause or the why. And a quick hint on that, the mentor Rory Vaden taught me that the shortcut to why is who. So if you can find something from aside from yourself, do the thing to do the hard thing, to have a cause or a reason, you can actually stumble into a strong love or sometimes fear that will propel you forward. And for reasons that I'll get into another video, I actually recommend a relationship or who rooted in love. As for myself, my journey really began on leveraging the certainty part of the equation, really through practice and lots of at-bats and exposures. Especially over 11 years, there's no replacement for grinding out 150 doors a day, having 40 people tell you to get lost in varying degrees of bluntness, all to hear yes just a few times a day. But that doesn't have to be your path. This is very much a choose your own adventure thing. And it wasn't really until I got into my own deep work that my confidence increased across more than just my work domain. But in my opinion, the fastest way to build your confidence is a trick that most of us have been practicing since we were kids, but we've forgotten how to apply it with our adult lives. And it's by playing make-believe, specifically pretending to be one of our heroes. Now, I can almost hear the chorus in the comments already, that 2 minutes ago, I was telling you to be your authentic selves. And that's true. That's who you should be. But I don't think most of us realize is that our heroes are the people that we actually identify with. They're the people who remind us of the best parts of ourselves. They're just farther down the path of life. And where I really started to connect with this is as I reflect on my time as a kid, I grew up playing sports, like just throughout my life, football, basketball, swimming. I did a bunch of different things, but most of my buddies really were big basketball guys. And as a kid, I had a lot of friends who loved Kobe Bryant. And anytime we would be playing playground hoops or if we were at basketball practice, it really wouldn't take very long before somebody would do their best fadeaway, mid-range, and jumper impression of Kobe while shouting out his name, Kobe. But for me, honestly, Kobe wasn't my guy, and I didn't really like his style of play, also didn't really like his personality. And I was from South Florida, so the Lakers weren't really my thing. And rather, actually, it was the Miami Heat. And so my guy, my hero, when I was on the basketball floor was Dwayne Wade. So when the ball got to my hands, that was who I was envisioning. I would slash to the basket and do whatever I could to just lay out and get a decent angle at the rim, because that's what Dwayne Wade was famous for. And we all have somebody like that at work, home, or in our public sector, somebody who we admire and we look up to. And so when we're in a situation that requires that maximum confidence and the effort needed to get to another level, the easiest way that we can simply raise our frequency in all four of those categories is to simply envision ourselves as that person. Because when we envision ourselves as that person, when we identify with who our heroes are, the people who we want to become, the best parts of ourselves, we naturally shift that energy and that mindset into performing at a much higher level. And so when we receive those payouts from our confidence, if we can take that payout and reinvest it into our certainty or into our courage or understanding a better reason why for doing something or into our authenticity, we find that we really dive into that exponential rate curve. And so if you want to know how you can avoid spending the confidence and instead begin to compound it, I recommend that you check out this video.